A very good afternoon from a sunny Durban, South Africa. Welcome to the first of a three-part webinar series hosted by FIDIC, focusing on building sustainable future leader groups. I'm Jessica Ramchan of the FIDIC Africa Executive Committee and the FIDIC Future Leaders committee member. I'll be moderating this series for you. As we adjust to this period of unprecedented change and dealing with the global pandemic that is COVID-19, we can really only speculate on the shape and form that the economic and social recovery will take. The FIDIC COVID-19 webinar series, we're on number 17 this week, explored the multifaceted impact of the pandemic on our lives and the consulting engineering industry and the global construction sector. In preparing ourselves for the future of work and the future of the built environment, we can look to some key principles that will anchor this transition, including technology, an agile and creative workforce, and sustainable development that's hinged on the green economy. It's evident that such a recovery is a lengthy process and will transcend generational leadership and technology in an ever-changing environment. The FIDIC Future Leaders represents professionals in the consulting engineering fraternity under the age of 40. Previously called the Young Professionals Forum, this group has decided to embrace the change and ready our members, their member firms, and member associations into the new normal. The objective of this FIDIC Future Leaders best practice session on how to build successful future leader groups is threefold. Firstly, to contextualize the need for the future leader groups, and this reiterates this generation's critical impact on the profession and the sector. Secondly, to share information about FIDIC Future Leaders, our future leader regional groups, and our member associations groups. And finally, to create a network of future leaders who drive these groups in a more structured way by improving access to support where needed and to engage FIDIC at the highest levels. This webinar series will be available on FIDIC's YouTube channel and be incorporated into the updated version of the Future Leaders reference document due for release in August 2020. So over the next 3 weeks, we will engage industry leaders in understanding the role of future leaders in FIDIC, understand the need for the groups, and to explore how to enhance your group, and for member associations who don't have future leader groups, on how to start one. In today's session, we focus on understanding the why behind the future leader groups. This session will be structured as follows. We kick off with a welcome message from FIDIC President William Howard. We then explore the role of future leaders in enhancing the impact of member associations and to the built environment with FIDIC board liaison Aisha Nadar from Sweden, and Godfrey Ramalisa, the stakeholder engagement manager at CISA, that's Consulting Engineers South Africa. We'll then be unpacking the role of future leader groups with Cosmin Tabalcha, who is the chairperson of the FIDIC Future Leaders Committee based in Romania. We then go to Harold Stonehuge, who is the FIDIC Africa Future Leader Chair based in Lusaka, Zambia. And we'll close with a panel of a case study with two well-established future leader groups of South Africa and Canada, with Janko Banda of Consulting Engineers South Africa and Tia Hill of the Association of Consulting Engineering Companies Canada, to explore what they've done to remain successful. Next. Next. So we get straight into the session. I'd like to welcome FIDIC President Bill Howard to share his message and opening welcome. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you very much, Jessica, and I will try to be brief. We have a lot of speakers today. First of all, I'd like to thank the Secretariat for putting these webinars on globally. It's a real challenge to do this, and it's particularly a challenge to do it when folks are still working remotely. So thank you very much to the Secretariat. I'd also like to thank the speakers today, including Aisha, who's a fellow board member of FIDIC, for spending time with us to talk about this very important subject of the role of future leaders within FIDIC. And it's a huge role. So thank you very much for spending this kind of time. I know you're busy with your companies, you're busy with your families, and these are very challenging times. So thank you very much for that. FIDIC has a lot going on. We've had a lot going on before the pandemic, and now we've got even more things we're addressing. I could talk at length about the number of things we're addressing, but for the purposes of this particular webinar, I wanted to mention one theme, and that's diversity and inclusion, where I include the future leaders in this initiative. We really are focusing on diversity and inclusion within FIDIC in the broadest sense. And the future leaders have a huge role to play in this initiative. We're involving future leaders in all of our committees, and we want to find more and more ways to listen to them. And frankly, in my view, the larger the future leaders group gets and the more involved they are proactively, the better off we'll all be, because we certainly need advocates from all areas of stakeholders, particularly future leaders. So part of what we're trying to do over these three webinars is come up with ideas as to how to expand our future leaders group. Before turning it back to the speakers, there's a few things that I would want to mention quickly. Future leaders are helping our firms and certainly can help FIDIC as to how to work at home, how to work remotely, and all of the IT aspects of the new normal. There's a lot to that. A lot of factors are related to it, and I think they're exciting. I think they offer the potential for massive improvements for the way we execute work. But one thing has not changed. Many things haven't changed, but one thing I want to talk about that has not changed since before the pandemic is we have had a major problem with a limited amount of investment in infrastructure. We still have that massive need in many ways. After the pandemic, the need will even increase. In that connection, when the webinars end in the next couple of weeks, Nelson and I and the future leaders under Cosman's leadership want to restart an initiative of our State of the World reports, which will be focused on reminding the global community about the needs for infrastructure improvements to deal with the pandemic, as well as climate change, the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and certainly the abysmal record of the number of people on this planet with inadequate sanitation and drinking water. Hopefully you'll see more on that subject in the near future. The reason I mention it and connecting it with the future leaders is we're dependent on them to help us find better ways to communicate those needs using social media and those kinds of tools. That's just one example. A big example, but one example as to why we really need a very active future leaders group. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing your thoughts. So with that, back to you, Jessica.
Thank you, Bill. I think Bill nicely contextualized and set the scene for this afternoon's discussion. This leads nicely into the role of future leaders in enhancing the impact of member associations into the built environment. We often throw around these terms of member associations and member firms, and often if you're not integrally involved in the workings of FIDIC and your member associations, you might not know what's going on in your country. You might not know what's going on in your regional groups. And you might not know FIDIC's stance on all of these things. So we're gonna switch over to Aisha, who's gonna offer an overview of FIDIC's strategy that's pertaining to the future leaders. So Aisha, over to you.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you, Bill. I'm very honored and privileged to have been invited to speak today. And I think just to contextualize, to borrow Jessica's term, where FIDIC is going and where the future leaders fit into that and how they're going to lead us into the future. FIDIC, as you may or may not know, is a federation. It is comprised of its member associations, which are over 102 member associations globally. The focus of FIDIC is being the global voice of the consulting engineering industry. Now, and leading the consulting engineering industry visibly and effectively. That means leading our firms, engaging with stakeholders and governments, and leading in creating a built environment that meets society's needs, that is sustainable and resilient. We have been faced with the pandemic, the COVID-19, and this is an outlier or a black swan, a risk that was not anticipated, or it's a 100-year risk type of thing. So as we go forward and meet our strategic needs in this environment, we have to engage in creative thinking and in creative solutions. And this is where future leaders and the future leader groups are going to be instrumental in leading. And if we take a step back and look at what we mean by leadership, leadership is something where it is the art of delivering more than what management as a science thought was possible. And so the future leaders in FIDIC are going to be delivering solutions for a sustainable built environment within the context of this disruption of COVID, within the disruption of social distancing and the results of COVID, and doing that by creating value in society. They're going to be, and doing it within the values of FIDIC with quality, integrity, and sustainability. So they're going to be doing that, taking us forward into the new society. And it's going to be the baton will be turned over to the future leaders and the future leaders groups to navigate successfully and safely through this turbulent time, together with the current leaders, in a manner that takes us safely to the other side, and creating the new normal and realizing the new world in which we're going to live. Some of the solutions will be similar. Some of the solutions will be new. Some will be solutions we have never thought of. But it is the future leaders that will be taking us on the journey to a destination yet unknown, but one that addresses what Bill was talking about, the need for infrastructure, the need for sustainable and resilient infrastructure, spending, getting the investment in that infrastructure. So they're going to be successfully advocating with governments and those spending on maintaining and developing infrastructure, and engaging with the solutions and applying those solutions in creative ways to take us on this journey of delivering a sustainable and resilient built environment in a world that is a new world that has been created as this new world with the pandemic. And so I look forward to hearing about how you're going to use the current future leader groups and create new future leader groups to engage society, to capture and disseminate best practices in this new normal. And we look forward as the board to partnering with you in delivering this and creating a more visible and notable space for consulting engineers in the infrastructure industry at large. So Jessica, I turn it over to you and to your colleagues to hear more from you.
Thank you, Aisha. I think that's very reassuring to hear that and to also get the support of FIDIC's board in trying to unpack the new normal. And also understanding that FIDIC's board operates the global consulting engineering structure, but it's the member associations in the member countries that actually drive consulting engineering and drive this agenda. And I'd like to welcome Godfrey Ramalisa from Consulting Engineering South Africa to offer the member association perspective in advocacy, in succession planning, and also to talk a bit about the role of its future leaders groups. Godfrey, tell us why CISA supports the future leaders. Over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Jessica, and thanks to FIDIC for this opportunity to put forward a few thoughts, trying to answer the question as to what is the role of member associations of FIDIC, and also the role of the young professionals under the future leadership groupings. I've prepared like 6 slides to share some thoughts. If we can go to the next slide. When one goes back to history, really trying to get the foundation right, one learns that voluntary associations or member associations like CISA and many others who are members of FIDIC were established to regulate the industry, to prevent the unqualified people from selling engineering and built environment services. And the other aim was to protect the health and the safety and the welfare of society. I think when it comes to welfare of society, maybe as future leaders, we need to ask ourselves a question as to, are we really protecting the welfare of society or of our people? Can we go to the next slide? So now the role of young professionals or future leaders is to actually continue with this main goal that are foundation of voluntary organizations. So as young professionals, we are on the ground. We are the foot soldiers and the hope of the future. So we need to apply our minds and come up with strategies as to how are we really going to continue with this protection of the profession and protection of the society. I think with COVID-19, it's clearly visible, especially in developing or underdeveloped countries, that where infrastructure is lacking, they are actually faced with a bigger challenge. And the picture which I'm showing you, it's of young people from Wits University during their campaign and protest for the fees to fall. They had a hashtag which was called #fees must fall. So again, it's a question to future leaders as to what are we going to fight for and when will we achieve it? We can go to the next slide. So the role of young professionals, or the role of future leaders forums, it's important to organization, but it is also important for young professionals themselves because they get an opportunity to grow their skills, they get their opportunity to make a difference and to develop themselves. Next slide. Thank you very much. So the pictures which I've included in my presentations are from functions of young professionals. You can see some of the people which you know on the picture. I think all of us can see Harold somewhere there at the back on the right-hand side. So continuing with the topic of the day, the Future Leaders Forums actually assist the MA in contributing to the pipeline which is required for our sector. It provides a platform of foot soldiers who can go out and entice learners to choose math and science and eventually do engineering in universities. It also helps an MA with foot soldiers that will make sure that these students, they keep interested in engineering. And while they're busy studying engineering, the adversity, the young professionals will be influencing the environment so that when they qualify and they come to join the workplace, it is a better environment where they can function. And yes, the future leaders are also responsible of taking themselves, and they provide a good platform for member associations to grow its own timber. Can we continue to the next slide? It was a wonderful year last year for some people with awards, but this is what one achieves and gets when you participate in forums like Future Leaders Forums or Young Professionals Forum. So it also assists the member association with people who will carry forward things, who will participate in events, in initiatives, and with people who have a lot of energy to can really take things forward, and diverse ideas that can be that we can get from these young professionals. Hence, it is important for all MAs to encourage young professionals to come together under this grouping of future leaders. And in some member associations, their participation is even acknowledged now in boards of MAs or in councils of MAs. And their participation there is critical. And I think it's important also for MAs to encourage them to share ideas, to share their thoughts so that we can move forward. I would like to leave the attendees and all of us with a question asking if we are really willing to go out and make the difference. And if that is our intention, there is no better place to come together to fight for a cause than being under a Future Leader Forum. I think those were a few thoughts that I thought I should put forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Godfrey. So I think Godfrey's made a real clear case for why member associations should and do support the formation of future leader groups. And I think that as engineers, we are problem solvers, and the questions that we should continue to ask ourselves is, what problems are we solving? And Will and Aisha nicely contextualized the situation that we face. And I think that MA is also faced with particular challenges, and Godfrey will revisit us in subsequent weeks of the webinar, where he'll talk about specific strategies on how MAs can support and operate these groups. In understanding that there are problems to be solved and that we are the problem solvers, one of the really important areas that we need to focus on is from the perspective of the future leaders who are actually driving the groups. Godfrey talked about a sense of volunteerism. From now, we move on to unpacking the role of the future leader groups. And this really sets the scene in terms of all the structures that exist currently between FIDIC's regional groups and then the MAs. And we'll talk about how all of this fits together so that you can understand the support system that's in place and how you fit into that support system. So we head over to Romania, to Cosmin, who's going to share details on FIDIC Future Leaders and their groups. So Cosmin, over to you.
Thank you very much, Jessica. I will try to be briefly in the next minutes because I know Jessica as a moderator from previous conferences and I know that she is very tough in respect of the time. So I think the question is why? Why are these webinars that we are doing in the next 3 weeks so important? Because we thought that it's very important for you, for the future leaders out there, to know how you can approach your member association if there is no future leaders group there, and to help them with our help, because we have documents that allow us how for you to make it easier to create a future leader group inside your MA, and how everything is connected. And I'm going to talk a little bit in the next 5 to 7 minutes. I think the most important part now is the membership. What is the conditions for you to be part of the future leaders? There are only 2 conditions, and they are quite easy. So the first one is the membership is open to any engineer, planner, environmentalist, or allied professional whose member association, very important, is part of the FIDIC and wishes to join together with us to a global network of similar professionals into the FIDIC community. And the second condition is that the recommended age for the future leaders membership is normally considered to be available to individuals from the time of graduation with a professional university degree up to age of 40 years. Our vision, why this has started. So our vision as future leaders is to promote and empower the future leaders inside the FIDIC community in order to participate effectively in shaping the future of the consulting engineering industry. There are many purposes, but I put here on the slide only 2 of them, which I think that it's very important for you to understand why it's important for us, for you to come near us. It's to identify the opportunities and to promote the interests of all the future leaders in order to create greater opportunities for us to contribute, to develop, and to succeed inside FIDIC for the industry and towards external stakeholders. Also, you should know that us as the committee, the Future Leaders Committee, we are very, very close to FIDIC board and the secretariat on all the aspects of the future leaders, and we are consulting on every step how to develop ourselves. Next slide, please, Barbara. So, the Future Leaders started, formerly it was known as the Young Professional Forum. It was started in 2004, so 16 years ago. Then year by year, I think it developed. In the present moment, because we have changed our name, previously we were called the Young Professionals. Now from the conference from Mexico in September 2019, our new brand is Future Leaders, which are run by the Future Leaders Committee. In present, inside our committee, there are 24 members from 20 countries. Inside, we have the members who applied for the committee and stepping step by step to a process of interview in order to be part of the committee. And also we have each regional future leader representative. But I would like to tell you very shortly my story. My story started 10 years ago when I was involved in different projects with FIDIC contracts. And in 2010, I had no idea how this is functioning, what is happening with FIDIC all over the world. I can tell you that I approached my MA, the Romanian MA, who had at that time a young professional group. Step by step, I was involved in their activities. And in 2014, I made, that was I think the start initiative with FIDIC. I made in the Young Professional Management Training Program, which now is called Future Leaders Management Certificate, a new brand, a new program, very well designed. And from that moment, from 2014 until now, I have met a lot of colleagues, a lot of partners, and we are developing and trying to strengthen the consulting engineering all over the world. Next slide, please, Barbara. As I was saying, we are, this is how our committee is formed. It's 24 members. Actually, now we are in a procedure because it was a call for new members. We have 5 of our members in the committee which are leaving. And we are now in a process of interviewing the ones that apply for the committee. I strongly advise you to look over the site, the FIDIC site, our social media also, because there you always can find information, very important information. And I can tell you that this year, for example, we have a number of 47 people all over the world which applied for our committee. And now we are in the final step to decide who are going to be our colleagues for the next 4 years. We have this call for new members in each year. Usually it is published around October, November. And as I was saying before, I strongly encourage you to look over our website. Next slide, please, Barbara. So, how we are organized? We are talking at the level of the member association, Future Leaders Group, and then on each of the regions, we are organized in, so all the member associations from that region are applying to the specific regional FIDIC organization. We have the groups you see inside. It's the FIDIC Future Leaders Committee, which is directly connected to ASPAC, which is the Asia Pacific regional FIDIC, to GAMA, which now is called Africa Future Leaders Committee, to FEPA, which is the Federation of Pacific also committee, and EFCA, which is the Europe Future Leaders Committee. So inside our committee, we have the members from all the 4 very important regionals. In this way, we are creating and we are having a direct communication and collaboration, and we are trying to have the information from all the continents in order to know how we can develop our network. Next slide, please, Barbara. We have a lot of activities, really a lot. I try to summarize here everything, but there are many more which have to be mentioned. In communication, we have the newsletters, the social media, the blogs, the website. In networking, as I was saying previously, we have all the regional organization. We are participating to a lot of conferences, and not only participating, we are speakers, moderators, we are delivering papers and articles. We are participating to national conferences, to regional conferences, and especially to the international conference of FIDIC. Also, no, please. Okay, thank you. And also very important, it's mentioned there because it's with the red color, is the ones that I mentioned here in my presentation, is the Future Leaders Management Certificate, very important, and I will talk in a few minutes about it. The booklet is this year. Next slide, please, Barbara. This is for the Future Leaders Management Certificate. This is, as I was saying...
You can wrap up, please.
Yep.
Thank you.
I told you that Jessica is very strict on time. So for Future Leaders Certificate, I'm strongly advising you to participate to this program. You can find more information on that site, which is on the right part. Next slide, please. And also, we are now doing for this September, it's a call for papers, which is finishing on 30th of June, so at the end of this month. It's very important for your future leaders to promote and to send papers. The theme is infrastructure development and consulting engineering in the new normal. So we are respecting your papers. Also, you have there the website where you can find more information. The next slide, please. You see here we have, I put in the end a lot of pictures from different of our conferences where we have met. And I can tell you that I'm strongly encourage you to go to your managers and to promote this group and to be a part of this group, because this is creating not only that you are going to be inside the network and sharing information and knowledge, but also it also creates for the future possible business opportunities. So come join us and be the voice of the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cosman. I think that there's always lots to say. The chat box is really busy, and I do encourage you to continue to send through your questions. With regards to how the structure of FIDIC and the regional groups will operate, we're going to be covering that in subsequent weeks. So also please do pay particular attention when that happens. We now welcome Harold Stonehenge, who is the chair of FIDIC Africa the FIDIC Africa Future Leaders Group.
Harold, you can start, please.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jessica, and previous speaker, Cosmin, for that presentation, speech that you gave. I think to begin with, I would like to state that it's indeed a very wonderful opportunity and privilege to be speaking at this juncture, especially that we are talking about a time, or we're having this webinar at a time when FIDIC Ghana switched over to FIDIC Africa, having a new name. I think for me, it's a very wonderful occasion and happy moment that the name FIDIC Africa Future Leaders has been co-opted and adopted. And I'd like to thank everybody that was involved in ensuring that we have this name change and it's come to effect before we have a webinar. Another thing that excites me about this webinar for future leaders is that we have the moderator right now coming from Africa, and I think she's doing a very wonderful job so far. Jessica, thank you so much. So straight away, I'll go into FIDIC Africa, previously called Gamma Young Professionals Forum, but I think now we are all adopting the new name of FIDIC Africa Future Leaders. So when did FIDIC Africa Future Leaders start from? I'll take you back into history. About 7 years ago in Khartoum, Sudan, in January that year, FIDIC Exco held an executive meeting where they approved the formation of Gamma Young Professionals, then now called FIDIC Africa Future Leaders. 3 months later, at the conference in Khartoum, which was the FIDIC Gamma conference, FIDIC Africa Future Leaders was inaugurated. It was attended by over 40 young professionals from different parts of Africa, Nigeria, Sudan, Ghana, and South Africa. And at that conference, a steering committee was put in place, which comprised of 8 steering committee members from across those 4 countries. The purpose of forming FIDIC Africa was to provide a unified voice for all future leaders in Africa so that they could contribute effectively to the industry which they belong to, which is a consulting industry of Africa. From 2013 to date, we have seen tremendous improvement or tremendous progress amongst these future leaders in Africa. As I mentioned earlier on, at the inauguration of the forum or Future Leaders Group, there were only 8 steering committee members who formed part of the steering committee, coming from 4 different countries. But we're talking about 7 years down the line today, we have over 22 members who form the FIDIC Africa Future Leaders Committee. And the number of participants spans across the continent. Today, we have representation from over 8 countries, which makes up, who make up Future Leaders Committee of FIDIC Africa Future Leaders. So as a forum, or as a committee, that has been very encouraging to see that young ones are coming forth to embrace the consulting industry and take up leadership roles that are wide open for them. What have we done in the past 7 years as FIDIC Africa Future Leaders? You'll be happy to know that since 2017, as a forum or as a committee, we have held consecutively a pre-conference a workshop for future leaders. For 4 years in a row now, that has continued, which started in 2017 in Cape Town. Today, the young ones, or the leaders, the future leaders, are so actively involved. I would like to talk about a number of things, but I think Cosbin summarized most of the things that are similar to what FIDIC Africa Future Leaders do. For example, quarterly, we are engaged in preparation of newsletters where we engage the future leaders of Africa on what is told for them or what is out there for them as future leaders. It is indeed encouraging to see that a number of future leaders have shown interest across the continent. It is for this reason that we, as a Future Leaders Committee, decided that okay, we need to have this webinar so as to help those future leaders groups that are inactive become quite active. We know that with the age of COVID-19, which has come in, it has been a challenge to engage a number of young professional, future leaders. It's been the challenge, but then in this age of technology, we are not left without an option. We have a platform like the one that we're using right now, where we have continued engaging young ones. So if you look at the history of the future leaders, FIDIC Africa Future Leaders, you see so much potential in these future leaders. And as a committee, we would like to encourage all future leaders to participate in all FIDIC Africa activities, as well as member firms to continue sponsoring and encouraging their future leaders to be actively involved in all activities that FIDIC Africa Committee is engaged in. Ultimately, as a committee, we are happy that we have representation across the continent, which is very encouraging, because ultimately we are the ones that will contribute to the infrastructure development of the continent. It's a wonderful opportunity to all of us, as mentioned by Cosmin earlier on, that we need to take up these privileges that have been unfair to us. So when the call comes out for new members to come on board, I would like to encourage all future leaders or young professionals across the continent to be actively involved, to participate in these activities that are being carried out by the future leaders of Africa. And ultimately, I would like to thank FIDIC board for always being there, as well as the FIDIC Africa Executive Committee. This group of old men has really shown leadership and encouraged us to be active in being future leaders. One example where they have shown leadership is that right now we have a female future leader, Jessica, who is a permanent executive member of the executive committee. So you see diversification in there and inclusivity. The FIDIC Africa Executive Committee deserves to be commended for the time and the opportunities that they are given to all FIDIC Africa future leaders. And to all young ones, FIDIC Africa future leaders, I would like to encourage you all to be active. And as we go on in this series of webinars, I'm sure most of the questions that you have about how to stay afloat as a FIDIC Africa MA regional or rather country group will be answered along the webinar series. My parting thought for young ones or FIDIC Africa future leaders is that we are the next generation or the talent pipeline for the next generation of consulting engineers. And hence we need to take hold of this mandate that we have and hold tightly to it for us to see any development that we wish to see in Africa. Thank you, Jessica.
Thank you, Harold. I always love how Harold refers to, we have young professionals, we have future leaders, and in Harold's terms, we have young ones. Thank you, Harold, for contextualizing the role of the regional groups. And again, to reiterate, next week we will have the chairs of all the regional groups join us, and we will then engage. So please do also bear in mind that some of the questions that come through regarding the regional groups that we might not take today, we will address next week. In understanding the landscape that governs how we operate, it's always good to have an example of a group that's really done well for themselves. We have a number of successful future leader groups across the world that are affiliated to FIDIC, and we've invited 2 such groups. The way that we're going to do this is that we've invited Yanko Banda of Consulting Engineers South Africa and Tia Hill of the Association of Consulting Engineering Companies of Canada. And these are 2 really mature groups that have really gone through the steps of developing their groups, and they're going to show us what they do and also share some pearls of wisdom in terms of how they continue to be successful. And we're going to start with Yanko. So Yanko, over to you. Please, can you share with us the perspectives from CISA's Young Professionals Forum?
Thank you very much, Jessica. So I'd like to observe all time zones. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to participate in this webinar. So as Jessica indicated, my name is Yanko Banda, and I am the CISA Future Leader National Chairperson, and I'm also a civil engineer working in the transportation space for a member firm known as AM Consulting Engineers in South Africa. And I'll be taking you through some of the initiatives of, or some of the steps or things that we've done, indicating or explaining how we have managed to remain successful. So my presentation will try to outline the 5 W's and the H, those being who, when, what, why, where, and how. Next slide, please. So as my colleague Godfrey indicated earlier, Consulting Engineers South Africa has been in existence for about 68 years now. And when it was initially formed, as in the quote by Kofi Annan, every new idea and initiative meets with the resistance. We have to find the courage to take risks, even to fail if the goal is worthwhile. a grouping of professionals deemed it worthwhile to take the risk and form an organization that would be the voice of consulting engineering. And they did this in 1952, and we've been in existence since then. And this year would be the 68th year that CISA has been in existence. But when it was initially formed, it used to be known as the South African Association of Consulting Engineers. But obviously with evolution, we rebranded so that we could stand out and be known as that voice for consulting engineering in South Africa. And with evolution, or as the organization grew in the early 2000s, 2004 in particular, a young grouping of professionals decided to take the risk and say, we also want to be heard as young people. And then that's when a Young Professionals Forum known as PACE at the time was formed. And with like any new organization, you will stumble here and there. So there wasn't really much of a structure, or we were sort of like figuring things out as we are going. So at the time, we mainly had 4 branches in Gauteng province, KZN, and in the Eastern Cape province. And in 2008, CISA rebranded from SAACE into CISA. And continuously like started to change and develop itself. And then as the YPF also began to grow and the future leaders began to become confident and they learned lessons, we started forming, we started becoming a more organized structure. And around about 2010, that's when young leaders such as Jessica and Gia and Amanda and them formed a document or compiled a document that would guide how the various branches or the various committees in the various provinces would operate. And then we started having a structure where even when previous leaders were leaving a committee, whether due to age or they moved on to other greener pastures, there was some sort of a handover system. So they would still remain on to sort of like assist the incoming committee and ensure that there's a smooth transition and continuity between the outgoing and the incoming committee. And as we also began to formalize and start finding our feet, in 2013, the Young Professionals Forum heeded a call from one of the leaders who was asking, what is the Young Professionals Forum? Is it just a book club, you know, drinking tea somewhere in Randburg? And then we decided that no, we want to be taken as a serious movement of young people who are going to fill these spaces in future. And that's when certain events or flagship events such as the Imbizo, which is a Zulu word meaning conference or gathering, was formed. And this has been going strong for the past 7 years. And it is an initiative by young professionals for young professionals. So the whole event is organized by young professionals. We get young professionals to share what they are busy doing in their own spaces and just to inspire the next generation of young professionals. And in 2015, as indicated, as we continuously learn new lessons and we realize where the gaps are, we managed to, or the organization decided that it would be ideal in order to give the young professionals, as Godfather indicated, be the wind beneath our wings. YPs or young professionals started representing the forum on various committees of CISA and forums. For example, our treasurer sits on the financial committee. Myself as a national chairperson, I sit on board and council, and you are also part of the decision making, so you give inputs to some issues that are affecting the industry as a whole. And around about 2017, certain young professionals also began chairing some of these committees. For example, Jessica is currently the head of the Gender Diversity Forum, and another young professional, Refile Lisufi, is the chair of the Transformation Forum. So yeah, and then now 2020 and beyond, it's that we are continuously adapting to the changes that are happening in industry. I mean, right now, the whole COVID situation is exposing certain gaps that have existed, but it has also given us the opportunity to practice what we as engineers are meant to do. We are meant to be innovators, we're meant to be game changers, and we have just evolved or adapted to what is happening now in industry by just switching or finding new ways to continue with whatever foundations have been laid. Next slide, please. Sorry, can you hear me? Okay, thank you. So currently, our footprint, so this is a map of South Africa for those of you who don't know, and South Africa has 9 provinces. So as indicated, CISA is a non-profit organization, so we rely a lot on sponsorships, and our sponsorships do not only come from our member associations. We work with, we partner with people in the finance space, the legal space, anybody who is aligned to our goal, or whom we share certain aspects or aspirations, and we feel that we can help each other to achieve a common goal, which is to make the profession sustainable and to keep it sustainable for future generations to come. So we are open to young professionals in the engineering and built environment space under the age of 35 years. So as indicated in the previous slide, because we're continuously evolving, we realize that not all young professionals or engineers are practicing in the consulting engineering space. So we have opened up ourselves to engineers also practicing in public space and in the construction sector. So we have different ways of accommodating all engineering professionals, both in the public and the private space. And we are open to anybody as long as you're a young professional under the age of 35 who's passionate about engineering and are willing to volunteer your time. There isn't any financial gain, as most people would like to ask, but I mean, you do gain other expertise, like, I mean, you gain public speaking experience, you get to make networks with engineers, not only in your province, but throughout the whole of South Africa, as well as outside of South Africa, because we get to engage with other future leaders from other African countries and abroad. And currently, we have representation in 9 provinces. So we have grown in leaps and bounds, starting from having under 50 members. Now we're going about 600 plus strong. And from 4 branches, we now have representation in all 9 provinces. And some provinces even have 2 branches within the province because of the numbers or the spacing or the spatial development in that particular province. And out of the 11 branches, 8 of them are very active. The others, they also fairly active, but because of certain challenges, they're not as active as the other 8 branches. Next slide,
Yanko,
please.
if you can wrap up.
Okay, next slide, please. So our recipe is basically, the first step is that you need to volunteer and get involved, and then you need to take the steps to succeed. And you must just do it. Like, don't overthink it, just volunteer, do whatever needs to be done, you know, bring your expertise. There's no right or wrong way to do anything. And the people I've put here are some of the young leaders or future leaders who've taken the call, or who've heeded the call to say, I'm putting my hand up and I want to do something to be that voice or that game changer. Next slide, please. So how we remain relevant, as indicated, is that we collaborate with other voluntary associations. We collaborate with other YP groupings, as well as other future leader groupings, both locally and in other provinces. For example, we went to Botswana when they were launching their Young Professionals Forum, and we assisted with the elections and so forth. We host a variety of technical and social events, such as the CISA YPF Leaderships and Management Seminars, where we get industry leaders to give best practice and the knowledge that they've gained throughout their profession. We have a job shadowing initiative, which where young professionals get to explain what they do on a daily basis to high scholars. We have the Imbizo, all these other events, and then we have also fun events like the beach volleyball, we have indoor soccer, we have quizzes, just so that we can let our head down and relax. I mean, engineering can be quite nerve-wracking, so sometimes you need to just chill, you know, over a couple of drinks and light conversations. We also prepare newsletters on a quarterly basis. Here we get to share what we're doing in the various branches with all our members, and you know, just to keep people interested or knowing what is happening and explaining how they can get involved. And we also have a succession planning where we're continuously getting new people in, and we have old members staying in to assist with the new members, and this is outlined in our business plan, which is available on our website. And as indicated, we're also continuously evolving according to the times. Next slide, please. So yeah, one of the other ways that we remain relevant is that we have quite a very strong social media presence. So you can join our movement on the link shown. We are active on Twitter, we're active on Facebook, we're active on LinkedIn. So you can get in touch, you know, just drop us anything that you want to talk about. If you attend some of our events, you can just let us let us know what you liked, what you didn't like. And yeah, you can just, you know, chat to us. Next slide. And yeah, as Godfather indicated, these are some of the young professionals, some of the volunteers who actually make the Young Professionals Forum. And as indicated, the benefits might not be financial, but I mean, you get the opportunity to connect with like-minded people, you share information, you get support, because you realize that whatever is troubling you is you're not alone. There are other people that you can talk to. It's an opportunity for you to give back. It's a way to advance your career opportunities because you get to engage with other professionals, both locally and abroad. And it's just an opportunity to build your capacity and your knowledge amongst members of the forum. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Yanko. That really gave us a good picture of what's happening in South Africa and the road we've come. Just to explain where the Godfather story comes from is that Godfrey's been the champion of young professional development since 2007, and he's been the champion from the CISA side that's seen the growth of this grouping. So lots of the future leaders everywhere call Godfrey the Godfather of young professionals. So that's where the Godfather stuff comes from. And it's also a privilege to have the Godfather here with us. To lead on to what's happening in Canada, I'd like to share a quote by Sheryl Sandberg that says that leadership is about making others better as a result of your presence and making sure that impacts last in your absence. And that's essentially the spirit of volunteerism, which is what we all do as part of our future leader groupings. So we're gonna head straight over to Tia. Tia, please can you share your experiences of the extremely successful future leaders group of ACEC in Canada? Over to you.
Yes, thank you so much, Jessica, and thank you to FIDIC for inviting me to speak today. My name is Tia Hill. I'm a project engineer with Associated Engineering in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and I'm going to speak today about our Future Leaders group in Canada, which is called the Young Professionals Network, or the YPN. Thanks, Barbara. So the YPN was created to strengthen communication between the 12 provincial and territorial YPN groups throughout the member organizations across Canada. So we're comprised of one representative from each province or territory across Canada, and all Canadian representatives from FIDIC Future Leaders. Next slide, please. So our mission statement is to bring together representatives from provincial and territorial member organization YP groups, facilitate communication and information sharing between the provinces, and provide guidance and recommendations to ACEC regarding issues affecting young professionals, and provide recommendations regarding the annual YP forum. So I'll go into a bit more detail on how we do that. So the YP definition, it varies a little bit in Canada. Basically, if you are a young professional in the province or territory that you reside, we will welcome you into the group. So we have 5 goals or objectives. The first one is to create a forum to allow YP groups across Canada to share their ideas and best practices. We advise and provide recommendations to ACEC regarding our annual YP forum at the ACEC National Leadership Conference. That conference is usually at the end of October in Ottawa. We serve as the voice of YPs to ACEC. We promote ACEC and its activities to other YP groups and also student organizations across Canada. And we provide leadership and guidance for the development of new provincial YP groups across Canada. The network composition is 1 rep from each province or territory, and all Canadian representatives from FIDIC YPF, and we currently have 1. The chair is a 2-year term, and the chair is elected at the ACEC National Leadership Conference, and the chair reports to the ACEC Canada board quarterly. And then the past chair stays on for 1 year after the chair role to provide some continuity and act as an advisor to the current chair. Next slide, please. So this is just a little graphic of our organizational chart. So you can see that the chair reports to the ACC board, the past chair acts as an advisor, and we also have the ACC communications manager on board who attends all of our meetings to act as a liaison between the YPN and ACC as well. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, the chair reports quarterly at the ACC board meetings, and as the chair, I'm actually a full voting member on the ACC board. As of about 2 years ago, this was brought in, which is great. We have our staff person who attends our meetings and helps with general administration, things like that. We also have a shared file sharing system, which is Dropbox, where we upload a lot of best practices and information that we share amongst the different groups. And we also work with the ACC staff to advise and recommend programming and leadership training content for our annual YP forum at the National Leadership Conference. So some of the past activities and objectives that we've done, next slide, please. So one is we do roundtable updates at every meeting, which is approximately quarterly or every 2 months, and at the National Leadership Conference. So we present on what each group has been doing, we share resources, and we share lessons learned. Next slide, please. We provide recommendations for the annual YP forum. So in 2017, just a few examples, we did a business strategy workshop. In 2018, we did a networking icebreaker. And in 2019, we had our inaugural YP forum where we looked at strategic priorities of the ACC Canada board and had our YPs really engage with the board members to provide tangible action items of what they can do to meet those objectives. Next slide, please. We also serve as the voice of YPs to ACC. So as I mentioned, I present an update to the board quarterly at the meetings. And typically when we have in-person meetings, we will alternate throughout different cities in Canada. So we will invite the local YPN reps to attend the meetings as well and really engage the young professionals with the board members. Next slide. We work with ACC staff to circulate and promote ACC initiatives across Canada, such as with student organizations. So in the past, we've circulated details for the annual student photo contest. We share details about local events in the ACC calendar. And we represent ACC at CFES Congress and Canadian Engineering Competition, so other student events at their career fairs. Finally, we provide leadership and guidance for development of new provincial YP groups across Canada, and I'm happy to say that we have 12 out of 13 provinces currently represented, provinces and territories, sorry. So we've recently engaged new reps from the Yukon and Northwest Territories, and we're facilitating sharing of lessons learned and organizational documents to support reps who want to facilitate new groups and deliver programming in regions that were not previously represented, for example, in Toronto, Ontario, and Atlantic Canada, the maritime regions. So some current leadership training. Typically, we have the YP forum, as I mentioned, and we have a lot of in-person events, such as conferences. Unfortunately, with the COVID-19 situation, we have had to put a lot of that programming on hold. So this year, what we're doing is we're offering a webinar series from design firm seminars, similar to what we're attending today. So in May, we offered the first webinar series, which had 4 sessions on from contract to people skills, how to successfully manage profitability. And later this year, we will be offering a second webinar on essential business skills for consulting engineers. So that's what we have been up to this year. Thank you everyone for taking the time to listen to the presentation.
Thank you, Tia. That's quite a full calendar, and that's a really robust grouping that you have in Canada. And I think that seeing the grouping and what happens with the chapter in South Africa and the chapter in Canada there's a lot of commonalities in terms of some of the critical success factors. And I see there's lots of questions in the chat box that have come up. And I think that what we just need to reiterate is that lots of the information that we have and that we've shared, the links and other answers to the questions will be shared. There's also a host of other information that we will share going. We are doing an update of FIDIC's Future Leader reference documents that will be best practice, that will contain best practice and also allow us to share resources and to engage and do lessons learned. So this is certainly the first of many engagements to come. So we're going to go into our question and answer session. Now that we've had some robust discussions and feedback from our panelists. So I've also had a scroll through the chat box, and there's been answers. Lots of our panelists have answered some of the questions and shared links where possible. I think we're going to take it from the top. If I can ask our panelists to unmute so that we can do this in a conversational style. And the way that we're going to do this, also because we've got a set of questions that we're going to go through, and our panelists are going to answer as best they can. So we're going to take the first question that came from Jitendra Singh of India. He wants to know how to engage very busy future leaders who are really busy with work, balancing work life, and then doing this volunteer gig at member associations. So I think we'll try best to answer Jitendra. Yanko is bobbing up and down, so Yanko will give you an opportunity to go first.
Oh, no, I wasn't bobbing up and down, but I mean, you are quite right that sometimes it's very difficult to get young professionals to engage. But I think what's key is that, for example, when I started with the committee hosting fun or social events, and some people technical sessions as well as social sessions. And I mean, you also kind of look at the times that work best for your members. For example, we partly see the South African Institute of Civil Engineers. They have a very strong student base. So you find that most of the events will be during office time, which doesn't work for our members. So we tend to have a lot of our events after hours. And when we started analyzing, when we'd have events, we noticed that Thursdays seem to work the best because it's sort of like a slow day, but in South Africa, Thursdays are known as Puza Thursdays, where people are like winding down for the week and stuff like that. So having events on Thursday evenings seem to work best for us, you know. So you won't always get it right, but I think it's also like just trying to find a balance between your offerings. What type of events do you offer? Because what works in my province does not necessarily work in Jessica's province. So yeah, you engage with your members, give them what they want, and try find slots that work best for them. So that's how we sort of like try to keep our members engaged, and we just adjust our system. Like, we are quite flexible. So some branches, I mean, they've grown in leaps and bounds. As indicated, we started with having 4 members or 4 committee members to now having literally a queue of people wanting to volunteer to such an extent that some branches are actually, the chairs are staying on for 1 year and allowing for a switch. But similar to what our Canadian colleagues do, the previous chair is still available to assist the sitting chair and just guiding in terms of what has been done. And we are open to start even new initiatives. So that's how we try to keep our members engaged.
Thank you, Yanko. I think one of the important things about how to engage very, very busy future leaders is that there's no one size fits all approach. I think that what's useful is perception of your group is really important. And if you want to have activities that form part of the workday, it needs to enhance the development of your future leader members. So the type of activities that you have, if you're eating to billable hours, becomes really important. So I think that also accrediting your activities with CPD points for continuous learning points for professional registration, that's a really good selling point for your activities. But I think on the balancing work life, it is difficult, but I think that the drive for volunteerism is really important. We have similar questions that have come from many of our participants. Latoya and Engineer Samuel, who basically asked about what is the structure for membership, and do you have to be a member firm or do you have to be an employee of a member firm to be part of the future leader groupings? Now, I think the constitutions vary from country to country, and also that Cosmin can speak a bit about FIDIC structure itself, which is the committee that you've got to apply for. But in your own countries, Tia, maybe you've alluded to it a little bit about how your membership structure works. But if you just want to elaborate on, do you have a membership structure that's not exclusively for member firms?
No, we don't, Jessica. So to be part of the ACC Young Professionals Network, that individual has to be working for a member firm in their province or territory, and their member firm has to essentially nominate them or put them forward to represent their province or territory on the YPN.
Okay. Godfrey did share some information in the chat box. And Godfrey, do you just want to talk about Caesar's structure for affiliates?
Okay, thank you.
Group the registration categories.
Thank you. Yeah, I think in South Africa, we do allow membership by people from other organizations. I think the only thing, or the only limitation that is there is they cannot become office bearers. They cannot become chairperson or vice chairperson or secretary or treasurer of the committee, but they can participate. They can be additional members on committees.
Yes, okay. Thank you, Godfrey. I think, if you want to offer the FIDIC perspective, the FIDIC Future Leaders perspective.
Yeah, I wanted to say some words about it. So I think it's very important for our audience to understand what are the levels and how we are functioning. Because as I saw in the chat box, could be a little bit of misunderstanding between what is Future Leaders, what is the training program, what is the Future Leaders Committee. So you had inside the presentation, you had Tia, which is the chair of the young professionals from the ACEC Member Association of FIDIC from Canada. You had Yanko, which is the chair of the Future Leaders of SESA, which is the South Africa Member Association. Me, I'm the chair of the ARIC, which is the Romanian Member Association of the FIDIC. So it's important like this. It's important first to have a member association inside your country, then to see if inside the member association you have a future leaders group. If you do not have this, and this is, I think it's one of the main purposes of this webinar, we can help you with all the necessary documents, we can train you, we can help you how to develop it and how to work near us. And then after you have all of this, you have the regional groups, how it's FIDIC Africa, how it's EFCA, how it's FEPAC. And at the end, we had FIDIC, who is covering everybody. We, as because I saw the questions in the chat, for the FIDIC Future Leaders Committee, we are the 24 members, which are running everything what is happening inside the different regional groups, the different member associations. And also there was another question about the training program. You do not have to, it's not mandatory. If you want to become part of the committee, a FIDIC Future Leaders Committee, it's not mandatory to do this training. But it's important because when we are doing the interviews and everything, we are looking very carefully that people who wants to be inside the committee Please, this is very important. It's inside the committee and not in the future leaders, only for the committee. If you apply for the committee, it's important for you to have been training in FIDIC, to have been active in your member association, to have delivered papers, to have been involved in your young professional group, in your member association, to be part of different conferences. This is important. But I strongly advise you, this is why I was saying in my speech that my journey in FIDIC started with this program. Is the program that, let's say, opened my eyes about the FIDIC world.
Thank you, Cosmin.
Thank you.
To also just reiterate that every country has different structures, and every regional group has different structures, and there's really no one size fits all, which is why it's important to read the reference documents of and the constitutions of those associations. Some of the questions that are coming through in the chat box asks if there's standard set of activities to be adhered to by the YP groups. What we've tried to do here is to give you some suggested activities that you can do to get things going. But again, there's also the cultural elements of the YP groupings in your country. There's what really you do socially. So we do lots of sport and social gatherings that gets people together, and that seems to break the ice and let people know what we're doing. But on the flip side, I see that we had a comment from Michelle Mativi, who asks, how do you encourage member firms to release their future leaders for activities and actually see the benefit from the Future Leader Association? And that also talks to the value of what we do as a future leader grouping, which is that you want to create a grouping that's not viewed as a union or that's not viewed as a social gathering, that what we're doing is really important. Bill, would you like to add some comments on how we should frame our groupings so that our member associations believe that it's a credible grouping?
That's a great challenge. I think one of I hope this is answering your question, Jessica, but there's almost a constant concern about younger members of firms and mid-level of future leaders about how they find time to do all the things they want to do and still serve their firm the way they're supposed to. I mean, we all, most of our firms, as we all know, work on time. Our assets leave the office at whatever closing time is. A little bit depressing, perhaps, is this issue came up when I was a youngster as well. It's a very difficult balance to have. Now, here's my recommendations. Good leaders realize that they are making an investment in their younger and future leader people. And good leaders find ways to encourage folks to pursue their own career advancement through other organizations like the Future Leaders. So I don't want to sound too negative, but if a youngster or a future leader is having an enormous amount of trouble of getting, quote, permission to spend a reasonable amount of time on other activities, then I would be a little skeptical about that, because I think it's kind of short-sighted. But it's the other thing I'd say is I'm optimistic about the future. I think some of the things we're learning working remotely is that people do not need to work from 8 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock at night and then have dinner and then deal with their children or whatever. There's enormous potential for flexibility in terms of the hours they work. I know we all see this. I see it with my daughter who's raising a family. Sometimes she's working from 8 o'clock at night till 11 o'clock at night or whatever, when the children are in bed. And I'm sure you all relate to that. But I think the connection there is the potential for more involvement with other organizations or professional organizations through the ability to work remotely. But having said all of that, it is a challenge. It has always been a challenge. And the reason it's a challenge is that, as I said in the beginning, our profession operates on billable hours and that kind of thing, and we need it. It's the lifeblood of the firm, and our assets, when we're all working in offices, our assets left the office at 5 o'clock. So that's the best I can do, other than, again, to recognize it's a huge issue and always has been. And I think it will get better with the ability to be more flexible as to how and when we work. I hope that hit your question, Jessica.
I think
Jessica,
I did.
Jessica, can I come in?
Sure, Harold. Quickly, yes.
Yeah, I would like to just give my take on that topic. I think for me, what really helped me to be given more time to do FIDIC-related issues is approaching the proprietors of our firms that we work for and highlighting to them the importance of you, a future leader, joining this committee. Because sometimes I think as future leaders, we shy away from telling the owners of these firms that we're working for that we actually want to be part and parcel of this committee. And the only time sometimes we want to tell them that, oh, we are part and parcel of this committee is when maybe there's a conference coming up. And for them, they'll be thinking, okay, this young one now is requesting for financial support to attend the conference, which will probably be in another country. But if we inform them right from the start about the importance or the intent of our getting involved in these FIDIC-related issues, I found, I mean, my boss was very flexible, that he allowed me to attend, meetings. He also allowed me to attend conferences. And when you inform him well in advance, at times you find that your member firm actually even supports your attending conferences. So I think it's very important that from the onset, if you want to be active in this committee, you inform your employers.
Thank you, Harold. So we've almost run out of time, and I know that we can have a really robust conversation around this. So we've got a host of questions that have come through in the chat box. So because this is the first of a 3-part webinar series, and we're going to continue the conversation, Barbara, if you would just switch to the slides on the upcoming webinars. The next one, yes. So we've got 2 more sessions on building a successful, on planning the future leaders group, where we will delve into the details, some of which we've asked have come up in the questions from our attendees. And then in week 3, we speak about operations and events for your future leader group. So we'll then do a deep dive with other member associations from across the world. So please do join us for those. But the commitment that we can make coming out of today's webinar is that we will share, we'll try and answer the questions that have come up as best we can, and also circulate all the documents and links that we shared. I'm going to, before we wrap up, give each of our speakers 20 seconds for their 20 seconds to wrap up. Any final comments? So we'll start with you, Cosmin. Anything from your side? Cosmin, you're muted. Just unmute. Thanks.
Unmute. Okay, like this. Yeah, I just wanted to say that to all the audience, ask us. I have put on the chat that our contacts are on the FIDIC site. So ask us and come join us and help us be the voice of the consulting engineering for the future.
Harold?
Yeah, So to the listeners, we'd like to encourage you to join FIDIC Africa, especially from Africa. You've seen the energy that is being exhibited in Africa. I think if you check on social media and all these other platforms, you notice that I think FIDIC Africa is doing quite well because of being the most actively engaged group. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Godfrey?
Yeah, I think let us continue with the good work and really take up on the fight for our profession and for the welfare of society, in particular here in the African continent.
Thank you, Godfrey. Bill, closing notes.
I'm sorry, Jessica, was that me?
Yes, 20 seconds.
Oh, I'm so sorry. The one thing that in my 20 seconds I would mention is that there is an opportunity, a huge opportunity for people participating in future leader programs to build a network. And the world is getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And it's well advisable to all of you mid-level professionals to have a network of professionals all around the world. It's an enormous advantage to you as you pursue your career, and actually it expands your own thinking as well. So that's something I'd really encourage you to think about when considering future leaders.
Thank you. Tia?
Thanks to Jessica and the FIDIC Organizing Committee for this event today. It was really well organized. My closing comments, I'd just like to say that I'm really passionate about engaging young professionals in the industry and with senior professionals. So if anyone wants to continue the conversation, if anyone's trying to start a new future leaders group in their region, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to help.
Thank you, Tia. Yanko.
All right, my closing shot is in South Africa, we're celebrating Youth Month, and my message to our youth and everybody here is to say, be the change that you want to see. So get involved, participate. If you're gonna sit and not participate, then honestly, you have no right to complain. So let's get involved and just be the change that we want to see for our profession. Thank you. Amanda.
So we now understand the need for a fully engaged sector in such unprecedented times. And this is a clarion call to our MEs to support the growth and development of future leader groups. And we also encourage our MEs to embrace the fresh perspective and energy that our future leader groups bring. So I'm going to close with a quote because I always do that. But before I close, I'd like to thank the FIDIC webinar team, FIDIC board. We had the FIDIC president sit in for our entire webinar, and that really shows the commitment from FIDIC's executive team to this. To our speakers, thank you for preparing and making the time available, and more especially to our attendees. We're here as volunteers, but also to serve the profession. So use us as best you need to, because that's what we're here for. So we are hoping to see all of you back next week, same time, same place. Please register on the link that we had previously shared. My closing timeless quote by Nelson Mandela, it says, "Sometimes it falls upon a generation to be great. You can be that great generation. Let your greatness blossom." So from me, until next week, thank you very much and stay safe.